My name is Kalina Berryman, and I am currently with the Newark Alliance for the Newark Youth Career Pathways Program, but homegrown parent education advocate through the Abbott Leadership Institute. And so this panel is near and dear to my heart, and I'm excited to learn about how these leaders have been able to shake things up and inspire parent advocacy in their communities. And so this workshop is called Igniting Parent Advocacy, Black Parent Group and Newark Parent Advocates. The description is given that due to the systemic inequities and inequalities parents face in schools, this panel aims to showcase effective parent movements and efforts and offer strategies to disrupt barriers and develop agency to assist children with navigating schools. And the irony of this is that some of the biggest barriers to parent advocacy is actually people who lead schools and work in schools. And so how do you build your strength? How do you build your confidence? How do you build your knowledge to be able to go up against the people who should share your mission? And so I'm going to hope that when we start to talk about strategies for that, that sometimes we're advocating to people who are not on our page, but who look like us, and who we have to look at every single day, and who are charged with doing better by our children. But our higher expectations often just don't match their low expectations. And so how do we make change in order to do that? I'm going to introduce our panel. Yolanda, I can barely see this that you sent me. So, forgive me as I squint. For over 15 years, Yolanda Green, raise your hand, Yolanda, say hello to the people. All right, give it up for Yolanda Green in the house. All right. She has served as an educator in Essex County, New Jersey, at both the instructional and administrative levels. Her unwavering commitment to social justice through education has led her to maintain high levels of student achievement and improvement to school culture, which she believes is another critical component of student success. Her diverse skill set continues to serve her well beyond the field of elementary education, as she now focuses her efforts on parent education through Rutgers Newark's Abbott Leadership Institute. In addition to her professional experiences, Yolanda has participated in several local volunteer opportunities, including serving as an interviewer for the Rutgers Newark Honors Living Learning community. Today, Yolanda's passion for social justice has led her back into a dream of her youth, which is covered by select, all, highlight, and copy, but I know she is in law school at Rutgers University, Newark, so let's give it up again for Miss Yolanda Green. And my partner in empowerment. Next up, we have Mr. James Harris III of the Black Parents Workshop. He is the chairperson. Let's give it up for Mr. Davis.
Thank you.
All right. Mr. Davis is an attorney currently residing in South Orange, New Jersey. He is married with 4 children, and all of his children have attended school in the South Orange Maplewood School District. James joined Black Parents Workshop in 2017 and became the chairperson in 2019. His primary mission is to advocate for students and parents on matters regarding education and to empower those that feel powerless against an educational system that has not made Black students a priority. James is a graduate of University of California at Santa Barbara and University of Arizona College of Law. Looking forward to hearing from you, Mr. Davis. Thank you so much for being with us. And then we have Dr. Diane Ledford. Dr. Dion Ledford. Dr. Dion Ledford, yes, give it up. Dr. Ledford. This is a small group, but we're a mighty group, you know? These are the real deal of the work. Dr. Dion Ledford is currently serving as the Executive Director and Superintendent of Roseville Community Charter School and Elementary Public Charter School in Newark. She has been in the field of education for over 30 years, having been a special education teacher for 15 years, before serving as vice principal, and now superintendent. She is a graduate of Hampton University and earned her doctorate degree in education from Rutgers University. Dr. Ledford firmly believes that a strong home-school connection is one of the key factors in the success of our scholars, and this is why schools must have initiatives that invite parents to be active participants in their children's education. All right, let's welcome again all three of our panelists, Dr. Dion Ledford, Yolanda Green, and Mr. James Davis. All right. So, this conference is about equity. And so I want to ask each of you, and Dr. Payne gave us his own definition of equity. And so I want to know from each of you, I'm going to start with Dr. Ledford. What is your personal working definition of equity?
It's a great question. So for me, I often get asked this question, and I'm responsible for making sure that my teachers and staff understand what equity really does mean, because oftentimes there's a misperception of equity meaning equal, and that everyone gets the same.
Right.
And in some respects, equity or equality is important, right? So equal rights, equal access to things. However, equity, in my opinion, means that everyone gets what they need. Not everyone gets the same. So even when I was a special education teacher in the classroom, I would have students of various grade levels, achievement levels, learning styles, and needs, right? So I would often get asked, why does so-and-so get to do this and I don't get to do the same thing? And how I always explained it to my scholars, and this is the same example I give to my teachers and staff at the beginning of every school year, is if you were playing out on the playground and you fell from the top of the slide and you broke your ankle, would I give you the same treatment as if you were to have a paper cut? How silly would I be to give you, who broke your ankle, a Band-Aid, and the person who has the paper cut, a cast?
Right, absolutely.
And the scholars would laugh because that seems ridiculous. However, every day in classrooms and schools, that's going on. So it's a metaphor to what really is going on and how we have to kind of reshape our thinking with regard to students' needs. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Ledford. Excellent. Ms. Green, Esquire.
Not quite. That gets me in trouble if I do that.
Yes, Ms. Green. What is your working definition of equity?
So I don't think I've ever developed a formal definition for equity. I definitely agree with Dr. Payne and Dr. Ledford in terms of it's about giving students, staff, people what they need. But I think as a mother, I think it was always intuitive because I have 4 children who are completely different, but I have to give them different things. And so even now that they're grown, sometimes they'll say, oh, this one's your favorite, or you like this one, or you do. And it's not about that. It's about, as a mother, I sense that they have different needs. And so I take that because as an educator, I've always felt if it wasn't good enough for my children, it wasn't good enough for anybody's children. So taking that posture as a parent, I applied it professionally, in the school settings. Specifically, it's what each individual student needs. It's what the teacher needs. It's what the class needs. It's whatever group you're talking about, what is it that they need to help them to be successful? And those needs can vary. It's not always physical needs. It could be emotional. It could be some support. It could be a lot of different things. So it's whatever that group needs.
Excellent. Thank you, Ms. Green. And Dr. Davis?
Not a doctor.
Oh,
But,
Mr. Davis.
I'll answer the question anyway.
Esquire.
So I think about equity in the context of my advocacy this way. It's 3 steps. 1 is the removal of a barrier. 2 is the identification of weaknesses established by that barrier. And then 3, the remediation process to overcome that weakness brought about by the barrier. So when you look at those 3 components, that's how we've been approaching equity from our standpoint as an organization with respect to our school district.
Excellent. And I'm glad that you were the last to respond because I wanted to start with you with the next question because I've heard a lot about your organization over the years and am always inspired. Great stuff, absolutely, and often inspired by your work. And so I teach a class at Montclair for teachers who are new to the field. And when I start to talk to them about advocacy, they look at me like they have no power to make change. They do not believe that that is possible. And so even when I share with them the examples of what we've been able to do, I've been able to do, they're still not quite convinced. And so I often tell them that, well, look, as a teacher, if you don't want to take it there, just get some parents together, give them the information that they need, and let them be your voice. And so, Mr. Davis, can you tell us about some of the work that you all have been able to accomplish in your district through your organization, the Black Parents Workshop?
Sure. So just a little bit of background. The Black Parents Workshop formed in 2014. The founding member, Walter Field, his daughter, at the time, the group didn't exist, but his daughter was not permitted to take an AP class.
Okay.
Because at that time in the high school, you could only take an honors or AP class if the teacher recommended you to take the class.
Yeah.
So you can imagine the result of that
Right.
policy. She was a great student, and the teacher and her had some what I'll call personality conflicts. And so this was basically a personal decision by the teacher not to let her take this AP class because of that personal conflict, which is not a good thing, obviously. And so he took that matter to the ACLU, and also they filed a complaint with the Office of Civil Rights for New Jersey, who then brought an investigation and a complaint against the district for this policy. What they found in that process was that there was also a policy regarding discipline and suspensions. So what you had was AP classes with white kids up here, but black kids down here, but suspensions with black kids up here and white kids down here. And they had the data to back it up over a number of years. And so because of that overwhelming data, the district did not even fight that information and ended up signing an agreement. Based upon that agreement, they were supposed to remediate these things through equity. I came in a little bit later than that and joined the organization. But through that process, we tried to work with the district to help them meet this equity goal with the resolution agreement. However, we got a lot of pushback. And so we ended up deciding from a strategic standpoint that someone had to hold the district accountable. And that's when we filed our lawsuit in federal court in 2018. Unfortunately, the district still did not take it seriously. But what we were doing during that time period, people like me and others, were establishing relationships within the school district with teachers, administrators who did want to do the right thing, and other parents. And so my personal view of this is, how do I empower others to also get the results they're looking for? And so we use our background in law and policy to help parents and teachers and administrators get the things that they need. So to your example, I've had several conversations with teachers that said, you know, this is going wrong, James, how do we resolve it? And I said, let me be the voice for you. Because if you come out there, you've got to worry about, you know, you don't have tenure yet.
Right.
They can just not renew your contract the next year. But if I come out, they can't fire me. So that was kind of the strategy of bringing some things to light, in addition to the settlement and the other methods we were talking about today. But it's a multifaceted approach. There isn't just one way to do it. Our way isn't the best way. It's one of the ways to do it. And not everyone can take people to court, but that's one of the ways we try to advocate for ourselves, our students, and our teachers and staff.
Excellent. Thank you, Mr. Davis. Yolanda, can you provide us some context about your work with ALI or NWK parent leadership in general? But it would be great just to tell us about your work at ALI to empower parents.
Okay, so one of the main ways we work to empower parents is through education. And so we have, I like to call it a flagship series called Social Emotional Learning, which is a 6-week series. And you may think, oh, well, how does that empower parents? It definitely empowers parents because it helps change their perspective on their parenting, on their own issues, their own situations that they've gone through. And that's transformational, you know, because you first got to understand, I think that's the first SEL competency. You got to understand, be self-aware and understand where you are first. And so there are a lot of barriers, I think you mentioned, to parents being empowered and getting involved in the schools, one of which is just knowing yourself and being aware of some of the things that impact you, whether it was some adverse experiences you had in school when you were young, whether it was some adverse experiences you had, maybe through family or things that have been told to you, spoken over your life that you've never overcome. That's very important to be able to recognize it, identify, and then to utilize some skills to overcome that. So that's been very, very important work that we've done at ALI. Again, the informational sessions that we used to have Saturday classes when we were in person before the pandemic. But we've had some online things as well. So educating parents, putting out the information about whether it's school boards, whether it's the politics, local politics, whether it's the history of Newark, whatever it is, that's very important.
Yeah, and can you just share a little bit also, because Mr. Davis was talking about how can we empower others, which I think is what we always keep in the back of our minds. And so can you explain how the SEL series is designed in terms of parent empowerment?
Okay, well, the series is designed around actually parent leaders, and parent leaders are actually the ones who deliver the series. And so they're part of the planning, they're part of the execution of it, and then we stay in contact with our graduates. We have a graduation, even via Zoom when necessary, and we stay in contact with those parents. So when there are other opportunities to show up and represent, we share that information, but we also give them opportunities to lead. So a lot of times, Kalina will say, oh, we have this opportunity, which one of our graduates, may be able to fulfill that role. So we do that. What else were you looking for?
No, that's it. That's
good?
it. That was it. You got it right. A+. Okay. All right. Dr. Ledford, can you talk to us about significant parent leadership work in your organization?
Yeah, so I might want to turn my mic on. So I love what both of you said, because I think it's good that I went third, because being a superintendent of a school district, we are who you're talking about with regard to just being those administrators, right, who might be the barrier in schools for the development of those strong parent-school relationships. So hearing you talk about adverse childhood experiences, during our Summer Institute, since maybe 2 years ago, I started to make sure that my staff understood that their childhood experiences lend itself to the baggage that they come to work every day with, including myself, right? So we all have our stuff that we carry with us into our relationships, into our work environments, into schools. So we have to acknowledge that first. So it's good you're doing that. We also have what's called, I call it Parent University, and it is a series of workshops and courses that our parents are encouraged to participate in. I made it something where they had to at least pick one course, and I also have parent committees, and I said, you have to participate on one committee. But what usually happens is that one committee becomes 2 the next year, or 3, or they become a leader in our, we also have a parent advisory group, so I have parent advisory group meetings every month. And why do I do that? Because I want to break down the barriers that are associated with whatever adverse experience they've had with school. Because we've all had something, right? How my parents approach school is based on how they experience school.
Absolutely.
And I try to tell my staff that you have to understand, there's not one parent who doesn't want their child to be successful.
Right.
They may not know how to go about it, but it doesn't mean they don't want it.
Right.
Right? So our job is to break down those barriers that are preventing us from having a strong homeschool connection, because that is the key. We cannot do it alone.
Absolutely. And barriers, you brought me right to my next question. I want to start with Yolanda. What are the greatest barriers to meaningful parent advocacy? What are the greatest, and don't front for these people, tell the truth. What are the greatest barriers to meaningful parent advocacy? And I'm going to say in Newark for you, because that's what you're representing.
It's very ironic because I can talk about theoretically what the barriers are, but as a parent and as a parent leader, I've actually experienced them. And I'm an educator, and I've experienced them. And so the greatest is this sense that parents don't know anything, especially parents from Newark or urban communities. They're bothered, they won't understand, they're just gonna make the work more difficult. I can go on and on and on. And I say I've experienced it because even though I can speak the language of all of my children's administrators, I was really surprised as a parent leader of the PTSO when I was getting resistance and pushback. And, you know, ideas that I was bringing, it's like, no, we don't need that, or that's too much, we don't need to do that much, or certain topics. So when we had parent meetings, you know, it's great to have those glowing topics, but I wanted to have, as the president, I wanted to have meetings about the scores and how the academics are going, okay? Let's talk about that. That wasn't too welcome, especially when I'm sitting in that audience asking a bunch of questions because I know how to read data, right? So I know how to read the reports. And you start to get the sense that we don't want all of that. So I remember thinking to myself after one encounter saying, wow, I'm an educator and I feel like I'm not wanted in this space. How much more do parents who not only are not educators, but maybe had some bad experiences in school themselves, how must they be feeling when they have to sit in these meetings or they have to go up against administrators who seem to know more than them? And I'm not trying to disparage this particular administrator because I think that the heart of this person, you know, was fairly good, but I think it's just easy to slip into this mode in urban areas that these parents don't know or don't even need to know certain things. Certain topics you don't need to worry about. We got this, you know? And as a parent, no topic is off limit because you have my children all day. So if I want to come in a building and walk around, I should be able to because my children are in this building. Notwithstanding, it's a public building, right? And so that's a whole nother story. But those are some of the barriers. And then also, when you're having meetings, the time, we all know that, the time of the meetings, not having food. Now, you know, we had meetings around 6 o'clock, 6:30. Yes, that's around dinner time. So I'm thinking we need to have food for parents, okay? Because when they get out of this meeting at 8 o'clock, 8:30, they don't want to go home and fix dinner, and they definitely don't want to, you know, and they don't want to also have to go home and help with homework, but if they have to, at least one of those issues should be taken off the table, which is the food. And so I really push for that. I think that that's a key component of every meeting, that you need to have food. Now, you don't have to have a big spread, you know, from a fine restaurant, but you need to have something to, you know, to help the parents out. So I think that's very important. And we shouldn't always feel like, you know, it's a bad thing to give things to parents or, you know, do raffles, do things. It's okay to do that, you know? It's not like that's not important. That is also important and it's necessary. So those are some of the barriers.
Thank you, and I want to hand it over to Mr. Davis because when you were telling us about the advocacy in your community, we heard policies, agreements, lawsuits. Like, it went deep. It went deep. So why did it have to go there? What is the greatest barrier to meaningful parent advocacy that you all face? What's the barrier?
Well, for us, it's been egos.
Okay.
And so before the lawsuit in 2018, as I was mentioning before, we were helping the district, or attempting to help the district, remediate its agreement with the government to address the equity issues. However, people didn't want us to get any credit for that help for whatever reason. And it came to a head when in 2017, the district had finally decided to remediate the suspension data I mentioned before by revising the code of conduct. Now, don't forget, the agreement came about in 2014. So it's been 3 years now since they haven't addressed the suspension issue. So knowing that we were one of the groups, you know, trying to get this changed, they set up a meeting with community leaders and people to remediate and revise the code of conduct, but did not invite us to the meeting. So we found out through someone else who was invited. And so we made the calculated decision to just show up. So I was the one getting off work first. So I walked in the building and sat in the room. And I could tell they were kind of surprised by me being there, but they were too embarrassed to ask me to leave. And so I just sat, and I ended up being one of the 3 people out of a room of 25. 3 of us kind of stayed throughout the entire process to revise the code of conduct. But all that was brought about because, in my opinion, of egos. And when you have leaders who put their egos before students' equity, you have what I'll call an elongated time period before things actually get resolved. But it only hurts the students. It doesn't hurt
Absolutely.
me. It doesn't hurt them. It hurts the students.
Absolutely. Thank you. And Dr. Ledford, what do you perceive as the barrier to meaningful parent advocacy?
I think it's misinformation,
Okay.
lack of understanding. And I would think too, like what you were saying about the ego situation. I don't know the situation, so I can't speak to it. But I would also add, from my experience, I think it's probably fear of maybe the unknown, or really not taking the time to find out what it is you don't know. And so that could be also an ego thing. So it's an interesting thing to think about, because I like to think of my colleagues as being very willing to want to do what's best for their students. So I don't think they would purposefully want to be the barrier. I like to think not. So I try to understand it from the perspective, and I do get this a lot, and my background is special education, so I liken it to this same situation. I have a lot of colleagues who are administrators who don't have a background in special education, and in my opinion, their decisions about some things are like, oh my gosh, like, can't do that, like, and I try to help them out. But I know that they would not be making these decisions had they had more knowledge about what they were doing. So I think that education is key, and not only from the perspective of parents needing to know more. And parents know their children better than we do. And I say that I'm a parent, so I know. I feel it's so important that parents participate. So I don't really understand that idea of being the barrier for that, but I don't, but I do understand that I think that if we really had a good understanding of how parents can help. I think that too. I think sometimes that you have administrators who don't know what to do with parents. They don't know what to do once they get in the building.
Right.
Then you have other situations where what's going on in the school is not what you want people to see. And don't tell anybody I said that, right? So I am open with my school because I know what we're doing and what we're doing well. And I encourage our parents to come and participate. But there are other situations, and no one around here, it's not happening anywhere near here, but some places, there are things happening that some administrators and teachers are uncomfortable about parents seeing, because then there'll be those questions, those hard questions. So I think they end up being the biggest barrier.
Absolutely. And I want to stay with you, Dr. Ledford, because you are a school leader. So the next question for all 3 of you, and I'm going to start with Dr. Ledford, is for a school to become a place that empowers, not engages, not involves, but empowers parents, what do they need to do differently? So for them to become places that empower parents, what do schools need to do?
First, you have to have opportunities for parents to participate in leadership roles. You really do have to have what I call, and instead of it, you can have a PTA, you can have the PTSO, you can have those kinds of organizations, but you really, what I tried to do was have a parent advisory. And so that monthly meeting is an opportunity for parent leaders to come together with administrators to really talk about what's happening and taking those deep dives into data, whether it be disciplinary data, academic data. You really do have to have those opportunities. And maybe in a public forum, people start to get their backs up when you're having those kinds of questions and discussions in a public forum, because people get afraid of perceptions and again, that knowledge base. You have to really be strong in who you are and your self-awareness, be okay with being questioned.
Right.
And not everybody is at that point. So, and I try to be very forgiving and give grace, because I want people to give me the same. So there's a lot of reasons why people might react the way that they do, and I try to understand that. But it's not an excuse for it. It's just an understanding. So giving spaces for deep dives into what might be going on with the school, I think is so important. You have to have those opportunities. And then I think the backdrop is the parent universities, the parent committees. Have parents participate in the fun stuff before you get into the serious stuff.
Absolutely.
Because they want to feel good about being there. And when they get that smile and that pat on the back and thank you so much for helping. Today we have our family fall harvest, right? It starts at 4, so I have to get out of here. But it starts at 4. And it's a time we have food trucks, and it's a time for the children to wear their
Can we
costumes.
come?
And
okay.
yes, you're all invited. 540 Orange Street. We're outside. It's safe. It's an outdoor event, and it's an opportunity for my parents to come together. Who doesn't want to bring their children to get food, pumpkins? We have a pumpkin patch, and those kinds of opportunities you have to have.
Awesome.
That breaks the ice. And they'll tell you, I go around and I'm talking to each one of them and I'm saying things like, so you're going to be at the next thing? And so you're going to be at Parent University? Oh, and so are you going to be on that committee? Do you see? Oh, this is run by all parents. You're going to be on the committee next time, right? When you can establish a rapport with the parents, then you can start to ask them about participating in the other layers, in the deeper dives. And I think it really does have to start there. They have to feel comfortable being in that environment. That school is their school. That's a public school.
That's right.
They should be able to come in any time. So I'll stop there, but I just wanted to just really make those points, and anybody who's listening, just really understand, if you're a parent, you have every right to be there. Just also give grace where grace can be given, but find ways, and if there aren't ways there, the suggestion that you might have is that, when can there be an opportunity for me to talk to you about this?
Right. Absolutely. So to recap, you said opportunities for parents to lead and do deep dives. I said vibes. Woo, it is Friday, guys.
Vibes is good
Deep
too.
dives. So if Yolanda would have come to you asking for that data workshop, you'd have been all for it, right? Because it's a space for that.
For it. It's a
Parent
space
university,
for that.
parent committees, establishing a rapport. That's something that Mr. Davis talked about too. Relationships, feeling comfortable being in that environment. All right, so those are 4 to 5 things that schools can do. Ms. Green, for a school to become a place that empowers parents, what does it need to do?
You need to have a culture that values parents. And so I'm not saying that this is something that we can make leaders have, but I think if we're in positions to choose leaders for our schools, for our districts, they need to be people that value parents from the get-go. Because to your point about sometimes leaders don't know what to do with parents, I think, and that is true, because so much going on. But if you value parents, they're going to be at the center of everything that you do.
That's right.
So when you're planning something, it's like, okay, what parents, how we get the parents involved. And I will give a brief example. I was on a call with Kalina in her class, and there was something going on that she thought was disrespectful to the parents, and I was a panelist representing parents. And I wasn't really offended by what was going on. It was okay. She stopped everything and said, no, we need to correct this, because I think this is being disrespectful to parents, and this is not going to go down on my watch. No one told her that. We weren't complaining. We were okay. But because she values parents so much, as soon as she saw something that didn't align with that value, she made a
Shut it
switch.
down.
She shut it down completely. And I teased her about it later, but that's because it's in her heart. So I think that is number one. I believe leaders set the tone of the building. So if you value parents, you're going to make sure that that trickles down. And it's not an overnight process. Sometimes it takes a while to establish that type of culture, but it's important. So I think that's number one. And I think that's paramount. Some other things. If you're going to have a PTA or PTSO, whatever it is, give space for those organizations to be as successful as they can be. Don't be a barrier to them, all right?
All right.
So if you have parents leading those organizations, they don't know the ins and outs of district policy and who can be in the building and what time you got to leave and all. They don't know that. So set them up for success by making sure that they have that information. So whatever it is that they need to be successful, within reason, of course, you make sure that is possible. Don't always say no. You want to have an event, you want to do food, and maybe you can't do it. Maybe district policy doesn't allow you to do it. Okay, you may have to communicate that. But then what's an alternative? What else can we do? Well, Ms. Green, we can't do this, but what about this? Or we do have Title I funds, and we haven't even talked about that, okay? Some of the Title I funds is specifically for parent engagement and not just giving food and dinner. But my point is, if it's an event that costs money, don't automatically shut it down. Where are some funds that we can use? And we know now with all the COVID money that was coming in, there's a lot of funds there. So there's ways, maybe you can't have this big event, but you can do something smaller. So I think that's important. The other thing is when you are making, I alluded to this earlier, when you're getting ready to make major decisions, include the parents. What do I mean? A very simple example, which will be coming up soon, budget time. Yeah. I've been in many parent meetings during budget time when the leader is presenting what the budget is and what they're going to do with the money. And I'm like, oh, but what about this? Oh, we've already set the budget. How you set the budget and you didn't have a meeting with the parents to see what else that they need, okay? So we also got to make sure that we're not doing perfunctory things. So we're going to have a parent meeting to discuss the budget, but it's already been set. Right. So how do I give input to a budget that's already been set? Now, that might have a lot to do with the deadlines that the district wants certain things, and that's fine, but then you need to plan backwards. So if the district wants your budget on this day, then you need to plan backwards to make sure you're having a parent meeting and enough time to get their input on what the budget should be. Again, it's not about giving parents whatever they want, everything they ask for. No, we all know that that's not possible. But to really give them a meaningful opportunity to be empowered, bring them to the table before you set the final, for example, budget.
Absolutely. And then don't let your ego get in the way of giving them credit for their good ideas, because that inspires others to get involved when they know that you are listening.
And also, let me just add, sometimes in church we say the sheep bring sheep in, right?
That's right.
So in schools, parents will bring more parents in. So if you set up a welcoming environment for parents, they'll have no trouble telling their other parent friends, come to this meeting, this next meeting. They'll be your your biggest advocate, and they'll put the public campaign out there because they feel for themselves that it's a welcoming place. So they have no problem encouraging other parents to show up as well.
Thank you, Ms. Green. Mr. Davis? You want me to repeat the question?
Nope.
Okay, thank you, great.
This one's just loaded.
All right. What's the school?
And I'm not an educator by any stretch of the imagination. I'm just a parent who has taken up this flag to go up the hill with. But I'll tell you, there are three things that come to mind with this response. School district needs to, one, listen. Two, they need to be transparent as much as they can be legally. And three, they need to respect the intelligence of the parents in their school district. All of this was kind of mentioned already, right? But those are the three things that I think school districts, well, I'll speak for mine, that mine has tended to trip over on numerous occasions, which has caused the following result, in my opinion. So in South Orange, Maplewood, I actually ran for the school board back in 2016. I did not win. At that time, there were roughly 53% black students at the high school. Today, there are roughly 33%. Now, the prevailing rationale for that from the liberals in our town, which are a lot, is that black people can't afford to live here.
Yes.
They don't know my friends. The people that I know are paying these high taxes
That's right.
and sending their kids to private school because they have no faith in the school district anymore because of the things we're talking about today. And that's one of the challenging parts for me, which is not trying to say you don't have to send your kid to private school. You got to make your decisions as a parent. But in my opinion, we should have all options on the table for us. It should not be, you know what, I just don't trust the school district where my taxes go. It should be, you know what, based upon our child, here are all of our options. School district, private school, whatever, charter school. We should be able to have those options too. And so that's one of the reasons why we exist. But to answer your question, the 3 I gave earlier are the reasons that districts need, or the things districts need to do to get parents to be involved and engaged.
Fantastic. You all are providing us with a playbook. So I'm taking notes and I'm grateful. I have 2 more questions. One I'll ask, and then I'll open up and do a check if anyone else has a question, and then I'll ask my last question. So you all stand before us empowered, sure, I don't think anyone could back you down if you know that you're right and that you know what you believe in. But that is a product of a line of influence and preparation and study. And so what skills, talents, abilities need to be developed within parents in order to fight systemic oppression, racism, and norms of low expectations? Because they're not just, fighting a teacher that just doesn't, want to do right by their child. They're actually, every time that we go against what's happening, we're really going against systems and norms that are longstanding. So what skills need to be developed within parents to do this work? And I'll start with Mr. Davis. What skills are needed?
I don't think there are any specific skills you need. What I think is needed is this. We have to be willing to share our experiences in real time.
Oh, yes.
What tends to happen from my experience is that parents will have an issue, resolve it on their own or not get it resolved on their own, and then not tell anybody for whatever reason, embarrassment or whatever. They just don't share it. There was a time when my second daughter was being kept out of an accelerated math program. The reason I was given, I'll just call it, it wasn't a very good reason. And so I was able to do some research on my own and realize that the district has set up a policy to only invite certain kids to get in this program. And so once I kind of called them on that, I shared it with others. And all of a sudden that policy was gone. And so what I tend to see is a lot of parents too, let me put it this way. Not everyone could be a Samuel L. Jackson, okay? They can't walk into a room, curse somebody out, say, I want this. Most people are like Obama.
Right.
They want to sit down, have a drink with you and whatever. And they tend not to listen to you when you do that, right? So that's why if we work together, I can be your Samuel L. Jackson for you in those situations where you need it. Because that's how we get to the next phase, by working together. So I think the one skill that people need is to share their experiences in real time, and then people figure out how do we get all of us from point A to point B.
Thank you, Mr. Davis. And I know that you said that no particular skill, but I'm going to tease out some skills that were all up and through what you just outlined. One was research. That was up there. The ability to influence, the ability to negotiate, the ability to organize, the ability to build consensus, and the ability to tell stories.
But I think the bottom line is that none of those are successful by themselves.
Absolutely.
So we
Right.
have to work together
Yeah.
so that we can collectively use all those skills
Absolutely.
to get to the next phase.
Yeah, and that's right, because at the heart of you won't even get to this if you don't have the willingness, which is what you led with, that if you have the willingness, you're going to figure out what is needed every step of the way.
I would not be here today if it weren't for several people, some of whom are in the audience right now, because I'm not an educator, but if the school district tells me something in response to a question, I can go to experts and say, this is what I was told on my question. Does this make any sense to you?
All right.
And I can go back and say, no, this is why it doesn't make any sense. That is how I was able to get from point A to point B.
Awesome. Thank you, Mr. Davis. Oh, yes. Yes. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Right. Yeah. Mm-hmm. No, and I think that's a great question, because that's why I asked this question, because some people have natural ability, but that leaves that power with those few people. So how do we begin to grow those skills? Mr. Davis, you were going to respond. What do we do?
It goes back to ego.
Yeah.
You know, I'm not perfect by any stretch of the imagination. I had to, when I was asked to take over Black Parents Workshop, it took about 8 months, because when I first joined, I was that Samuel L. Jackson character. Everything was like a battle, right? But I knew if I was going to be the leader of this group, I would have to take on some Obama qualities at different times. And I just wasn't sure if I could do it when I was first asked. So I had to go through my own little kind of Moses moment and go to the wilderness and figure out what I was going to do.
Okay.
And I came to the conclusion, after some litmus tests of my own, that, okay, I can now navigate this. But it's a constant kind of battle. Now, to your specific point, if you're dealing with someone who is a strong personality, a lot of those people out there, and they're not seeming to want to relinquish any kind of power or agency to anyone else, you may need to leave them on their own and form your own group. Because what's going to happen is, if you all say, you know what, you're a good spokesperson and all, but you just don't listen, so we're going over here and try to figure out ourselves, it may kind of shock them into a little bit of reality.
That's right.
But, you know, I don't know the person very well, so it may not work, but that's kind of what I would think about.
No, I think that's a perfect tactic. Absolutely. Ms. Green, I want to get to you because you're a skills builder for ALI. So what are the skills that parents need to learn in order to be effective parent leaders?
Well, in addition to the SEL, which I really think is not just a buzzword, you know, a trendy word now, it really, really is important. Two things come to mind. One is, I think it's important that you know the system that you're going up against, right? So it doesn't make sense to be very vocal and out there with your pom-poms and you don't know a thing about the system and the I don't want to call it a beast, but sometimes it can be, how it operates, how it functions. You need to understand that. So that's very critical. And you don't always have to go to the library and look it up on your own. Organizations like the Abbott Leadership Institute has been historically very, very important to knowledge building for parents and community members. I think that is key. Anything that any system, whether it's education, the healthcare, whatever it is, criminal justice, you need to know what it is that you're going up against. The other thing is, and it's something that I'm still learning, but was a steep learning curve for me as a parent leader, and that is, Mr. Junius Williams says, there are no lone wolves.
That's right.
And that was challenging for me because, to your point, Kalina, I am that person that, you know, you're not going to intimidate me, right? So I can go into any room, any meeting, and hold my own. But I've been holding my own and dealing with things, and successfully, but doing it on my own, which is not necessarily the best way. It's not the most effective way, and it's definitely not the best way for continuity, for lifelong, you know, organizations, or, you know, just to keep things going. And so understanding, and also to your point, it's not always best just dealing with your situation by yourself in a little corner over here.
Absolutely.
Now, of course, you have to use wisdom. You're not going to put all your business out there all the time, so I'm not, you know, advocating that. but it is important to understand the power of unity. And so I can go to the mic and speak very forcefully, very eloquently, but it's much more powerful if I got about 20, 30 people behind me saying the same message. And so understanding the importance and the value of organization is important. And I think that that's definitely something that parents have to understand. Sometimes we think it's just my kid. I don't have time to worry about your kid. You know, I'm just going to worry about mine. But we also have to remember that when I advocate for my child, more than likely I'm going to be advocating for other children and lifting up the circumstances for other children as well. We don't think about it. I haven't even thought about it like that sometimes, but it's true. So if I can get a change made in the school system or in the classroom, the building, whatever, guess what? It's probably going to benefit a whole lot more other kids. And so it's very important to find out what are the issues out there. I'm probably not the only one dealing with this. If it is a teacher, if it is a, not unwelcoming building administrator, whatever it is, I'm probably not the only one dealing with it. So if I go out and try to find out who else has this problem, what can we do about it? And, there are a whole bunch of things you can do about it, but that helps a lot.
Thank
It goes
you.
a lot further.
Can I jump in there too?
Yes,
Let's
please.
not assume that kids aren't watching. You made a great point, and I say that because one day my wife told me that one of our friends who was going through something, they decided to kind of be quiet about it. Their own child said, "Why aren't you fighting for me like Mr. Davis fights for other kids?" And I felt bad at one point because he said to their parents, but at the same time I was like, the kids are watching.
The kids are watching, yep.
And I think that's vital and important for their own kind of ability to empower themselves.
Absolutely. That's a great point. Dr. Ledford?
Well, I have to say, in listening to both of you speak about this, what rings true for me is the common thread of communication. So learning how the skill of communication is so important, and also I'm going to add the skill of listening. Because I think that what gets lost a lot is the art of speaking about what it is that is of concern to someone who can help, and that person receiving what you're saying so that they are open to helping. So I think that there needs to be the common understanding that we are not adversaries. We are partners. And I try to develop in my school district a culture of partnership. And it's not just a parent-school partnership, it's community partnership also. So when you have all of those three prongs working together, what you will have is a more educated community. And I don't just mean book education. I mean just really being able to understand the systems that you talked about, being able to know how the school system works, being able to understand curriculum, being able to understand how curriculum is developed, being able to understand what policies are state-driven versus policies that are district-driven. All of those kinds of things are so important for us to have an intelligent conversation. Because if I have a level of understanding and you have a different level of understanding, we're talking to each other, but really, no, we're not. We're just kind of talking at each other. And that's when the adversarial relationships evolve. So if I would say anything in terms of what skills are necessary, I would say that the art of communication and the art of listening, and the development of a culture where both can exist, and it's for the benefit of children. And I'll even end with that. We really do need to remember that it's all about children.
That's right.
It's not about the adult egos, and I'm going to continue to say that because I think there's a lot to that. It's not about the adults. The adults are the vehicle by which our children get what they need. So if we know that it's about children, then we should be prepared to do whatever it takes to make sure that children get what they need.
Now, time is running out, and I have to ask this last question because it really grinds my gears, okay? So I want to address this. And it's not, I don't think it's on this paper. So there's a saying that we measure what we treasure, right? Yet, I have never been to a single educational conference or presentation where parent engagement or empowerment statistics were shared. Never once. I've never seen it. We do not measure and truly hold accountable schools and school districts for parent involvement, engagement, whatever you want to call it. There is no accountability, and there's no clear definition of what it is. And so that tells us that even though our mission statements say parent empowerment is important, even though we have departments dedicated to it, we don't treasure it. We don't treasure it. We see data all the time and it's not there. So my final question to you is, how can school system leaders, so that's superintendents, mayors, elected officials, and funders, those who fund education, how can they hold schools accountable for parent empowerment, parent advocacy building when we know it's so important? What can we measure to show that this is something that we treasure?
I would say for my school district, we do measure that. We look at it as parent involvement. And we look at it in terms of our strategic planning. So every year I do school culture and climate survey, and I do it for my staff, but I also do it for my parents, and we do it twice a year. And within that are questions about involvement, engagement. How do you feel about the school? Do you feel like teachers have high expectations? Do you feel like teachers enjoy working with your children? I mean, it's all of that. So I find that very important. I don't know, maybe I'm a standalone. I don't think so. I think that other people do too. I would like to think my colleagues do as well. So I would say the one thing that needs to happen, maybe there does need to be something where there's a continuum, where everyone has, every school district, there's an expectation that they are, involving parents, or really just engaging them, right? Mm-hmm. Engaging them to be involved. Yeah. And how are they doing that? And I do see state surveys. Now, whether you're right, though, maybe they could be a little bit better about when you go to these conferences, really having those to share it, because we are asked that. Mm-hmm. So surveys are administered through the state. I know I've answered them myself, and like how often do you engage parents? In what ways? What do you do? What's successful? What's not successful? Mm-hmm. So that's a good point that you make, and it's something that I hadn't thought about. The next step, what are you doing with the data?
What are you doing with the data? All right, thank you. Ms. Green?
Well, that's what I was going to say. In my experience, I've been a part of school teams that, we survey and we get the feedback, written feedback from parents, but then, to your point, the next step is not there. So if you get a bunch of surveys back that have some negative comments or some feedback in a particular area, what do you do with it the next school year? I've never been a part of a school team that actually had a meeting at the beginning of the year and said, hey, we got this data from last year, right. Let's change this and that.
Right.
It hasn't been in my experience. So I think that is important. Those surveys are important, so I don't want to minimize them, because they are one point of contact, and they should continue. But I think we need to do some follow-up. The other thing is follow the money. And so if your school is allocated a certain amount of money for parent engagement, and even specifically Title I, I understand Title I is not just for parent engagement. I get that. But for whatever amount that has been allocated to your school, how is it being used? And so if you see that those Title I dollars are not or barely being used for any kind of parent activities, that's an area of assessment that you can make. So I think following the money is very important, because whatever you
measure, you treasure.
Whatever you treasure,
you measure, yes.
But also whatever you treasure, you put some money to it.
That's right.
Okay? And
Amen.
so you need to follow that as well. And then the other thing is, and I don't know if this goes along with surveys, but some way of identifying the actual parent leadership opportunities you've made available. So if you have a parent advisory group, okay, great. What have they done?
Right.
If you have a parent advisory group that meets every month, but there's no deliverables, there's nothing that's come out of that significantly, then I think that says something about a lot of things. It could be on the parent side, maybe they need some more support, or it could be on, the school administration or whatever not supporting them enough or shooting down whatever they come up with. So when you have these type of groups, even the PTSO, PTA, what have they done? Now, of course, that's not on the building principal because that's parent leadership. Right. But still, once again, if you value parents and what they have to bring to the table, if you see that there's a PTSO, PTA in your building, they're not really doing anything, they're just coming together, talking or griping, whatever it is, then maybe you need to step in and support them in some other kind of way. Maybe there's some initiatives that you need some support in making happen. So, for example, at the school that I was the president of, I don't know if I won't say it, but anyway, there was an issue about students crossing the area, and there were a lot of times that students were almost hit by cars. Staff members were almost hit by cars. The principal said, we've been trying to do something about this, but it's just continuing to be a problem. And so it was the PTSO that went and contacted the people in the district that were in charge of, safety and transportation or whatever, and working with the city. We got a sign out there, a lit sign that flashes. I don't think it's there anymore because I think it's been knocked down by a car, ironically.
Oh, no.
But it was up there for, for a few months. And so I think that that's important. I think that should be some tangible, measurable things that you can take away from either the parent organizations that are in the building or what the actual school leadership is doing.
Thank you, Ms. Green. And final word, Mr. Davis, you want to add anything?
Yes. So I can only speak to my school district experience. And I think I mentioned it earlier, but my district tends to only invite what I'll call the friendly parents to these various committees. And what tends to happen is that there's a committee formed, there's a couple of meetings, and then nothing.
Yeah.
And because they're the friendly parents that are on the committee, they're not going to hold anyone accountable, which is kind of why we exist today. We know that the superintendent has a boss who is the county superintendent, but because I've contacted the county superintendent numerous times and he's done nothing, even that's not an effective method. Wow. So that's why we said, well, the court of law could be the accountability holder for the school district. But I think it goes back to leadership being honest with the situation, right? If you only invite those that you agree with to the party, you're not really being a leader.
That's right. That's right.
Ultimately.
Yeah.
A good leader has to deal with those that have a differing point of view, even if they're loud.
All right.
And that's why I said I had to go to that wilderness moment to see if I could do that. Because I knew I had trouble with that. And so, and I can't speak to the current superintendent of our district, but it doesn't appear he's gotten there yet. Maybe he's still out in the wilderness, I don't know. Maybe he'll come back one of these days. But right now, it's not working. And so we need to kind of continue to hold his feet to the fire. And let me make this clear. My two biggest barriers right now are two black men. Let's not even, I'll keep it real today.
Yeah.
And so when that is in front of you,
That's right.
it's not just the white racist conservative boogeyman over here. These are two black men, one of which went to Morehouse, who are the biggest barrier I have to trying to get equity for the black students in the South Orange Maplewood School District.
Wow.
And it's a challenge, but we'll continue to keep fighting.
Wow.
I just want to,
I just wanted to agree with regard to your statement about the invitations to parent advisory groups. There are no invitations that are specifically sent out in my district. Everyone can come to the parent advisory group. So I'm going to just say he's right. If that's what's going on, that's not what should be going on. It should be an open invitation. If you're a parent of any child in that school or the school district, you should be invited to attend. And I look at it, I tend to see the same parents over and over again, unfortunately, but because you want to, it's open to anyone. But you always have that, and no matter what district, you're gonna have your core group that are always gonna be out there for the children doing what they can. I would encourage everyone to insist on those open spaces. So if you're feeling like you're not invited or you don't know about something that's going on, but yet your neighbor down the street seems to always know, then that's something that you can ask to be included and ask for some accountability with regard to maybe offer some suggestions about how to get it open to the wider public. Oh, can you post it on the information board whenever you're having those? There's a way to ask for things. Hopefully you don't have to get to the point of where you're involving legal counsel, but I would suggest starting with the communication of what you need, what's easier for you. I use like a Remind text, the Remind platform for text messages, if that works. So some of you have a skill set or knowledge about things that may pertain to your work experience or your experience in general, or your knowledge of what another school district is doing. Share those ideas, because sometimes it's the limitation of the people in charge in their knowledge base, not so much the resistance. You know, sometimes it's resistance, but sometimes it's really that they don't know. So if you know something, share it. And I would say, I would just, wanted to just throw that out there.
I just want to jump in really, really quickly because I want to push Mr. Davis's point a little bit more. Iron sharpens iron. And so today our focus is about parents and parent advocacy. We're not really talking about school leaders, in particular, evaluating them. However, I will say for your consideration, any leader who only has yes people around them is not a good leader. Okay?
Absolutely.
Because we need diversity of thought. Right? We need diversity of thought. So if you see a leader where it seems like they only have one type of person or one type of parent, now we all know that, if we're in leadership, we do want people to kind of is on our side, right? We all want that, right? But if that's the only type of people and we never have anybody that will challenge us and give us something else to think about, then there's a problem. There's a problem with the leadership.
Yeah. I know one great lesson from the civil rights movement was when they were preparing for sit-ins, they wouldn't just prepare you to be an activist, they would also prepare you for what you might come up against. And so I think as we build parent leadership, we also have to say that. Now, once you start speaking up, you might get uninvited to the meetings. You might get this might happen. Even I'm uninvited to my son's school meeting. But I don't care about no communication board, Dr. Leffer. I'll be honest. I just show up and I look at them like this until they call on me, okay? But, it happens. So we have to prepare people for what they're going to face and empower them to face that too.